Hi everyone, and welcome to Norton Rose Fulbright's Texas Business Court Insider, where we will track developments in the Texas Business Court and beyond. This is our inaugural episode, and thank you for joining. So today we're going to be providing an overview of the first 7 months of the Texas Business Court's operation. We're going to look at case counts, exchange of benches program, and just generally see what's been happening in these first 7 months. But first, why don't we introduce ourselves?
Thanks, Andrew. I'm Rafe Schaefer. I'm a commercial and energy disputes partner sitting in Houston, Texas, handling complex commercial disputes.
And I'm Andrew Price, sitting in Houston as well, and I'm the co-head of the commercial and energy disputes practice for the firm here in the United States. Again, thanks for joining. So if we look at the setup of the Texas Business Court, it is very unique. It's the only court in Texas, Rafe, that's really set up the way that it's set up. And first things first, and first principles that'll be important as we go forward, this is a single court. It's got 10 judges, but it's functioning as one unified court. It has 5 operating divisions, the 1st Division in Dallas, the 3rd Division in Austin, the 4th Division in San Antonio, the 8th Division in Fort Worth, and the 11th Division in Houston. And within each of these divisions, there are 2 judges, which I'm sure everyone knows are gubernatorial appointments, confirmed by the Texas Senate, currently for 2-year terms. The presiding judge, going back to this concept of a single court, the presiding judge, the chief, is Judge Grant Dorfman, who sits in Houston in the 11th Division. And he is exactly what the title suggests, kind of in charge of the operation of the court. And so here we are on March 27th, 2025, and we're just a few days short of the court being operational for about 7 months. And Rafe, what have the case filings, the case statistics, case counts looked like across the whole state and then division by division?
Sure. So across the entire Texas Business Court, 98 total cases have been filed since it opened its doors on September 1st, 2024. Those filings have not been evenly distributed among the divisions, unsurprisingly. But when you really drill down, the uneven distribution is striking. Of the 98 total cases, almost half, 47 of the cases, have been filed in the 11th Division in Houston. The next quarter of cases, 25, have been filed in the 1st Division in Dallas. And then of the remaining 26 cases, 10 have been filed in the 4th Division in San Antonio. 8 each have been filed in the 8th and 3rd Divisions in Fort Worth and Austin, respectively. And so, perhaps unsurprisingly, the distribution of case filings has generally matched the population centers within Texas. But Andrew, when you just talked through the business court divisions and that each division has 2 judges, half the cases are filed in Houston. Does that mean that 2 of the 10 business court judges are handling half of all the cases?
It does not, and that's been one of the very interesting things we've noticed since the court got up and running. Judge Dorfman, the presiding judge, has been employing what is called an exchange of benches procedure, and essentially here's how it works. Basically, once a month, Judge Dorfman appears to be going through the business court's docket as the presiding judge, and in cases where the defendant has answered, Judge Dorfman is once a month reassigning cases from divisions that have many cases, like Houston or Dallas, to the divisions and judges in the other divisions where there are less cases. And Judge Dorfman is authorized to do this by the enabling statute for the Texas Business Court, and there's also a docket equalization rule in the local rules promulgated by the Business Court. And the stated reason for doing this is to obviously equalize the dockets amongst the divisions and the judges, and to promote the orderly and efficient resolution of these complex business disputes, which is, of course, one of the very reasons why the Texas Business Court was created in the first place. And, what's interesting about these orders of assignment by the presiding judge, which I think is the title he's using, is you're transferred to a new judge for all proceedings, including trial, but yet the cause number doesn't change, and importantly, the venue of the case does not change. And so, there's some practical implications that kind of flow from that. Do you like what?
Sure. So, we've talked about, and I think much has been written on and thought about the promised efficiencies of the Texas Business Court and the idea that the Texas Business Court will allow parties in large, complex cases to more efficiently move through those cases. Obviously, if you have a situation where half of all of the complex cases, large complex cases in Texas are being handled by two judges, at some point in time, that's going to get less efficient. And so by using this exchange of bench procedure, the court is allowing the single business court to effectively have all the judges with a relatively even docket to allow the continued orderly and efficient administration of all of these cases, regardless of what division they get filed in. The other interesting point, because the business court is a single court, as you mentioned, Andrew, is this exchange of bench practice doesn't implicate any visiting judge statute or any of the issues you come up with in other cases where a judge has to recuse himself or herself and a visiting judge sits and parties are moving to strike the judge or objecting to the judge. This is akin to the judge presiding over a case in a single court, sitting by exchange of benches, a lot like a district court hearing practice in Austin or San Antonio for those who practice in those jurisdictions. And so, Andrew, you talked to us about presiding Judge Dorfman's reassignment order. After that order is entered, what happens next in these cases where an exchange of benches occurs?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is a welcome letter, kind of welcome order of sorts by the judge receiving the new case. And there's a few interesting things in these orders which are following a similar form. One, the judge, the receiving judge, the new presiding judge is making very clear and reiterating, your case remains pending in the venue and division that it was originally filed, such that any trial is going to be there. The judge is also making clear you are not going to have to travel to come see me. So in a hypothetical where Judge Dorfman has sent a case in the Houston division to a judge, say in the San Antonio division, the judge is making clear that you don't have to come to the San Antonio division for hearings. All hearings will be held either virtually or the judge in San Antonio is going to come to Houston and have the hearings in Houston. And so, it's not going to impact the parties or the lawyers, from a logistical perspective in terms of these exchange of bench programs. So, Rafe, we've seen this happening, Judge Dorfman's rulings or assignment orders. What impact has that had on those case counts that you started off telling us about?
Sure. So as you mentioned, the cause number of a case doesn't change. The location of a case doesn't change. And so if you pull up the cause number for a reassigned case, it may say it's in Division 11A, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Judge Adroge is hearing the case. In total, there have been 15 orders for exchange of benches since the business court opened its doors on September 1st. Of those, 7 were sent to the 4th Division judges. 3 each were moved to the 3rd and 8th Division judges. And then actually 2 cases were exchanged within the 11th Division itself from Judge Adroge to Judge Dorfman. And so going back to the statistics we went through and just looking at open cases, based on the judges presiding over the cases, the 1st Division judges have 15 open cases. The 3rd Division judges have 8 open cases. The 4th Division judges have 12 open cases. The 8th Division has 9 open cases, and the 11th Division has 23 open cases. And so, Andrew, let me ask you, are there any other, for a litigant who's filing a lawsuit in Texas Business Court or thinking about filing a lawsuit in Texas Business Court, are there any other strategic implications to think about with respect to the exchange of bench procedure?
Well, for sure, and we've talked about this, and my guess is our viewers are cluing into this as well, which is you cannot file your business court case, at least in the Houston division or the Dallas division, and be assured that you are going to get one of the 2 judges in that division to preside over your case, including the trial. So, one can then take the next step and say, I've got a jury waiver in my case, in my contract that's at issue in this case. And the further implications and strategic decisions that'll need to be made with regard to that, knowing that, okay, my ultimate fact finder here might not necessarily be one of the judges in the Houston or Dallas division if I file in one of the counties covered by that division. And again, we're going to have to take a wait and see approach, which is something I think people are saying a lot about the Texas Business Court. So we'll have to see how this kind of plays out. But certainly, in my opinion, that's something that folks are going to have to consider when deciding when and where to file their business court cases. And,
Sure.
You think there are other implications from this?
I do. Obviously for cases involving a jury trial, because the case doesn't move, your jury pool is going to be the same pool of potential jurors, regardless of what judge is presiding over the case. One interesting thing you and I have talked about is how the exchange of bench procedures relates to what the business court judges are considering as precedent. Regardless of whether the business court judge is from San Antonio or Houston or Dallas, the presiding court of appeals that issues binding precedent for the Texas Business Court is the new 15th Court of Appeals. The Texas Supreme Court is obviously binding on the Texas Business Court, but the entire other body of appellate court case law, the First Court of Appeals, 14th Court of Appeals, that is only now persuasive precedent for the Texas Business Court. We're going to have a lot more to say about that topic in the future, but suffice it to say that it's going to be very interesting to see how the exchange of benches procedure continues to play out across the single business court, especially with respect to the ongoing jurisprudence of the business court.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and there's been language in some of the recent opinions coming out of the Texas Business Court that very precisely say exactly what you just talked about, which is, hey, we're deciding this issue, I'm deciding this issue, there's no binding precedent because the 15th hasn't ruled on it and the Supreme Court hasn't ruled on it. And I think I mentioned to you, it was kind of a aha moment for me, which makes perfect sense in this construct of single court. But it really does have implications when you think about the fact that these judges are really writing on a clean slate in a lot of instances, and they are not bound by, even though Judge Dorfman is sitting in Houston or a judge is sitting in San Antonio or Dallas, they are not bound by what all of us would typically call the original courts of appeals that cover those cities. They're only bound by the 15th Court of Appeals, which of course itself is brand new and in fact hasn't ruled on a lot of issues. So a lot of topics that are going to be fun to kind of pay attention to and are going to be important to pay attention to for all practitioners and their clients. And we'll obviously be covering a lot of those on our future episodes. The legislature's in session. They're looking at some potential changes to the Texas Business Court, expanding jurisdiction, potentially lowering the amount in controversy requirements. So we'll be covering that as that develops. And Rafe, there's also been some cases and opinions that have come out that I think are going to be covered in our future episodes, right?
Absolutely. We've been monitoring the court's jurisprudence. It's gotten to work since September 1st. We'll have updates coming out on the court's first 7 months of action. Its cases on amount in controversy, its decisions on removal and subject matter jurisdiction, and anything else that develops from the Texas Business Court.
So again, our inaugural episode coming to a close. Thanks so much for joining. If you'd like to receive notification of our future episodes, please be sure to subscribe and like. And then, of course, you can also go to the Norton Rose Fulbright Texas Business Court Insider Hub. That'll be on the Norton Rose Fulbright website. A link for that is also going to be below. And there you can find links to these videos, and you can also find our written content, which tracks and kind of expands upon a lot of the things we're talking about in this episode and in future episodes. So thanks again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you next time.